This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
The latest in the global battle to contain the coronavirus outbreak. Africa confirms 28 cases in 8 countries as nations ramp up their preparedness. And the US puts a $7 million bounty on the head of Boko Haram leader Abubakar Shekau. Hello and a warm welcome to Africa Live on CGTN. I'm Lindy Mtongana in Nairobi. Also coming up this hour. In business, Nigeria's Senate approves President Muhammadu Buhari's $22.7 billion request. And in sports, ES Tunis looking for revenge as they host Zamalek in Friday's qualification battle. At this hour, our reporters are also standing by in different countries with the latest news. In Rome, Italy, CGTN's Ross Cullen will be bringing us the details of Italy's struggle to contain COVID-19. And our reporter Robert Nagila is live in Nairobi as Kenya launches its first coronavirus isolation facility. Africa Live begins now. In our top story, South Africa's President Cyril Ramaphosa has called on South Africans to stay calm following the confirmation of the country's first coronavirus case. A 38-year-old man has tested positive for the virus in the KwaZulu-Natal province. The man recently traveled to Italy and has been in self-isolation since his return. CGTN's Yolisa Njamela has more.
No need to panic because South Africa is prepared to deal with coronavirus. That's the message from the highest office in the country.
South Africans should not panic. We should be alert so that if people either show signs of some of the symptoms, they should immediately be able to get medical assistance. And all our medical care people, whether in the private sector and in the public sector, their alertness in identifying this disease must be at a much higher level. We are gearing up more and more as a country, and the report I've received from the Minister of Health has demonstrated to me that we can be more alert and we can go to higher levels of being alert.
The president, however, warned that the virus has the potential of turning into a national crisis and that its impact is likely going to be felt. But the country has full capabilities to deal with this.
It will have huge impacts on a number of things. It will have huge impacts on travel. It will have a negative impact also on our economy, which, as we all know, is in a very, very precarious situation. We will continue to ensure that we handle this matter with the necessary care and capability that it requires.
The patient who brought the virus to South Africa is a 38-year-old man who visited Italy with his wife. The couple were part of a group of 10 who returned from Italy. There's serious concerns here in South Africa concerning the HIV epidemic. More than 7 million people here live with the HIV virus, which seriously compromises the immune system, potentially leaving many people vulnerable to coronavirus. The president says his government is ready to deal with all inevitabilities.
We are in constant contact with the World Health Organization. And we also have South Africans who are working at the WHO who keep us up to date about this virus.
The president also commended China for the way the country has dealt with the virus outbreak thus far.
They have been able, having had the bulk of the people who have been affected, they've been able to show ability to contain it, and we wish them luck in carrying on with that.
The president also promised that in the coming days, government will demonstrate its seriousness in dealing with this matter. Yolisa Njamela for CGTN in Pretoria, South Africa.
Meanwhile, in Algeria, the government has designated specific hospitals to handle coronavirus cases. The country has confirmed 17 cases so far.
The Algerian state is taking care of the COVID-19 cases in specialized hospitals, such as El Kata in the capital, Algiers, and we have already confirmed that they are corona cases. We currently have 17 cases, including 16 from the same family. The state has devoted special and urgent care and follow-up, and in the coming hours, we will get the results for the medical analysis for suspicious cases, and perhaps these statistics will change.
Well, let's take a look now at how the virus has been spreading into Africa. The number of confirmed cases on the continent has now risen to 28. That's just after Cameroon announced its first confirmed case. Algeria remains the worst affected African nation with 17 cases. An Italian man and 16 members of the same family tested positive for the virus. Senegal maintains the figure of 4. The North African country of Egypt has recorded 2 cases. South Africa has announced its first case on Thursday. Tunisia, Morocco and Nigeria have reported a single case each. Well, here in Kenya, the construction of an isolation facility for COVID-19 patients has been completed and is being launched today. The Mbagathi Hospital facility was set up following a presidential directive as the country prepares to prevent any spread of the disease. Following pressure from various groups, the Kenyan government is expected to submit its COVID-19 control plan to the High Court. Well, our reporter Robert Nagila has the latest on this story now. He joins us live from Mbagathi Hospital in Nairobi, where this new isolation facility is being launched. Robert, of course, this is a significant step in as far as Kenya's preparedness goes. Tell us the latest from Mbagathi Hospital.
Absolutely, Lindy, you're right. It is a huge, huge step in Kenya's preparedness when it comes to coronavirus. Now, in the last half hour or so, Kenya's Cabinet Secretary for Health, Mutahi Kagwe, officially opened the infectious disease unit, the building behind me. Now, it's meant to act as an isolation center and a treatment facility as well, just in case we have an outbreak here in Kenya. Now, it's a 120-bed capacity, part of the largest referral hospital, which is about a kilometer away, Kenyatta Hospital. But in the eventuality that it's not able to handle a number of growing cases, then the government says that they also have a new facility, that is the Kenyatta University Referral Hospital, which is now being equipped, and says that that 320-bed facility will be then converted to assist in the fight against coronavirus. Just to give you a bit of background as to how we got here in the first place, about a week ago, a presidential directive was issued because of an uproar from a huge section of Kenyans that the country was not prepared. And that directive went into place, and within 7 days that facility you see behind me is now up and running. The government saying that there's just a few things that need to be done, but they're confident that they are now able to not just detect any cases but also isolate and treat them. Lindy?
And indeed, you mentioned that outcry from Kenyans about a week ago, and indeed the isolation ward is one aspect of preparedness. But do you think authorities have effectively dealt with other concerns raised by Kenyans last week, specifically around testing of potential confirmed cases, and indeed the handling of people that are coming from countries where the toll of the virus, where there are high infection rates?
Well, Lindy, the Kenyan government says that it has the equipment to test for coronavirus, assuring the public that it is indeed in control of the situation on the ground. It's also issued a warning to any experts out there that have been going on local TV and giving out interviews, saying that the only source of information regarding coronavirus will come from the Ministry of Health or the World Health Organization. So asking other experts to desist from giving out any advice or opinions on the preparedness or state of preparedness on the country. Now, the government has also announced that all international conferences that want to be held in Kenya, international conferences and meetings, have all been suspended for about a month. They also say that over 1,000 health workers have been trained and are currently being deployed across the country in the eventuality of any outbreak of coronavirus. Now, the government also announcing that despite the ban on flights from Milan, one of the centers that has seen a huge outbreak of coronavirus, they say that one plane was allowed to land in Mombasa, the coastal city of Mombasa, this morning to pick up Italian tourists who had been stranded there after that ban went into effect. So basically the government saying, look, we're doing as much as we can. They've also put out a toll-free number on SMS for Kenyans in case anyone feels that they need some advice or feel that they may have symptoms and need some advice on what to do. So they say that they are on top of the situation on the ground, and in the coming days there will be some public health programs that will be happening across the country as well.
Well,
Lindy?
Kenya certainly stepping up its response measures. Thank you so much, Robert Nagila, joining us there live from the launch of a new isolation facility at Mbagathi Hospital. Let's turn now to Zimbabwe, where the country's Minister of Health and the country's WHO representative have praised China's efforts in fighting COVID-19. They say the world can learn from China's experience with the virus.
In Zimbabwe, we have not had a case of coronavirus 19, COVID-19. Therefore, we cannot talk about any experience in as far as treatment is concerned. But we are gathering information from China on what that they've used, which has been successful in treatment. So it's that area where we are learning from China. So it's very useful that China is going through this. And the rest of the world, we are now having to learn. Where the countries are now affected, they're also learning from China. It's experience. It's a global issue. So we all have to learn from each other.
You may know that the Chinese government invited a team from WHO, an international team of experts, and who were in China for several weeks and visited and saw the situation in China. And together with what they learned from the Chinese experts, they have released a report with very good experience and recommendations to other countries that already have confirmed cases, as well as to countries like Zimbabwe, which do not have cases. So very important lessons from China have been shared with the world, and we in WHO are supporting the countries to apply and implement those lessons. These efforts are very welcome. Indeed, because this is a new disease, and since China had the largest number of patients, they have the largest experience, they have the largest knowledge.
The Free Egyptians Party in Cairo has hailed China's measures and efforts as it battles the COVID-19 outbreak. The chair of the party expressed confidence in China's ability to overcome the epidemic.
أنا مش متخيل أنه لو كان بداية هذا المرض كان قد تفشى.
I can't imagine what would have happened if the outbreak started in another country and to what extent the epidemic would have spread. However, the Chinese government has taken great courage to truthfully announce the epidemic to the outside world. Although the government is well aware that this will affect tourism and the economy, China has prioritized humanitarianism. I know that China is now very developed in the medical area, and everyone is doing his best on his own work, so it will definitely win the battle. China has achieved rapid economic development in the past years, and a country that can create economic miracles must also create medical miracles. The Chinese economy is a huge driving force for the world economy. If the Chinese economy is affected, the world economy will also be affected.
In Somalia, the government has rallied donors in efforts to strengthen its prevention mechanisms against the COVID-19 virus. The Chinese embassy in Somalia has also given an update on measures taken to support Somali students on scholarships in Wuhan. CGTN's Abdulaziz Bilo has more from Mogadishu.
This is the second media briefing by the Chinese top diplomat to Somalia, Xinjiang, on China's efforts to contain COVID-19 coronavirus.
Chinese government has been taking a most comprehensive and significant prevention and stringent prevention and control measures in a highly responsible attitude towards people's health. many of which have exceeded the requirement of international health regulation.
At the biggest transit hub in Mogadishu, a medical team is on standby to monitor all incoming passengers. The Immigration Department is also checking travel patterns of passengers to detect those who might have traveled to affected countries. On Wednesday, the Ministry of Health met with the donor community in Mogadishu to establish a joint task force and circulate new country contingency plan on preparedness for COVID-19.
We need to know that COVID-19 does not discriminate. It has affected many, including world leaders. Somalia has big challenges. One of them is that its borders are open and uncontrolled. We have a long coastline, ports, and several airports. We have advised coastal communities to monitor and report all activities in the sea and report fishing trawlers in their regions, especially if it has foreigners on board.
Somalia is among African countries that have students in Wuhan, the epicenter of the outbreak. The Chinese embassy in Mogadishu now says that it's in contact communication with them and has provided a hotline number, psychological counseling, food supply and online teaching to all students during the outbreak. Several countries in Africa have already recorded positive cases of COVID-19, including 2 in sub-Saharan Africa. And with no direct flights linking the affected countries with any major city in Somalia, Ministry of Health officials say that this is one of the key measures in place to ensure that the coronavirus epidemic doesn't reach Somalia. Abdulaziz Bilo, CGTN, Mogadishu, Somalia.
Health workers in China have been on the front line of battling the coronavirus. Across the world, collective efforts are helping to curb the rate of infections and treat patients. But amid the scramble to contain COVID-19, misinformation has been fueling fears.
This is a pushback. The coronavirus outbreak in China has brought out the best and, quite sadly, the worst in some of us. And when the dust finally settles, and it will, there will be heroes and villains. The heroes will be those Chinese doctors and health workers who risked life and limb on the front line, battling to contain the disease. They saved many lives and put the virus on a back foot. They acted selflessly and in the interest of humanity. But this virus has also exposed the primeval instincts in some of us. Here, the media, or at least sections of it, stand accused of being orchestrators and purveyors of misinformation and disinformation. We all know that what we are dealing with here is the coronavirus, or more specifically, COVID-19. There is no such thing as China virus or Wuhan virus, as it has been characterized by sections of the media. In framing the narrative this way, the media is merely playing to the gallery, and through this action of theirs, turning into agents of disinformation and misinformation. By doing this, these sections of media have fallen short on delivering on the cardinal principle of their profession, that of informing and educating and empowering the people, providing them with the requisite information to act and protect themselves. The outcome of this unfortunate campaign of disinformation has been to label, stigmatize, isolate and ostracize a group of people on the mere account of their origin. As we may now all know, there have been cases of the virus that have no China link. Of course, it is easier to sit on the ivory tower behind glass windows and doors and craft newspaper headlines. But it's quite another thing to be on the front line. It is unethical to make a sales pitch out of a tragedy, to sensationalize in order to increase newspaper sales volumes and ratchet up television viewership ratings and online hits. China, as a responsible member of the international community, acted responsibly in the wake of this outbreak, and it continues to do so. It has opened its doors to World Health Organization teams and shared the findings of China's Centers for Disease Control study. On its own volition, without pressure from anywhere or anybody, China has made information available and accessible for all. China's efforts have drawn praise from the World Health Organization, which characterized them as the new standard in global emergency response. The setting up of hospitals, lockdowns, quarantines, the sheer mobilization of frontline personnel have been on an unprecedented scale despite the economic impact to China's economy. In times like this, the world must stand together. Finger-pointing and blame games are not useful. Action saves life, not backpassing. It is time for solidarity, collective efforts, standing with one another, not isolation, stigmatization, and ostracization. Indeed, the coronavirus outbreak has brought out the best and the worst in some of us. Regardless, good will always prevail.
Let's turn to Italy now. The country has taken the drastic measure of closing all schools and universities for the next 10 days to try to contain the spread of the coronavirus. The country is the worst affected in Europe, with over 100 people now confirmed to have died from COVID-19. Ross Cullen reports from Rome.
Nicola Pavoni is at home and looking after his children. It's a sudden change of plans, but he understands why Italy's schools were shut, but says the government also needs to encourage people to be calm.
The feeling is like we have some apocalypse coming. And another thing that the government should do is do a good communication to not spread the panic. Because for me, I think this is the biggest problem that can happen.
There should be students streaming through these gates, coming in and out of classes. An unexpected vacation by government decree. Schools had previously been closed on a case-by-case basis as and when people tested positive, but the government's now had to take the unprecedented measure of closing all places of education, including this high school here in Rome. Universities have also ground to a halt. For the lucky ones, there's online learning, but many others face losing precious study time.
Not all universities are prepared for this. Probably I would say most of the universities are not, and so in this case this will be disrupting for students. If it is just 10 days till March 15, I mean the disruption will be limited. Of course we don't know if this measure might be extended, and in that case the disruption will of course be more significant.
And with millions of children now at home, parents who work are seeing their professional life disrupted.
It is a big problem because we will then not have enough days for the validity of the school year, and this is a real problem. The final exam, which is set for June 16th, will be postponed and so on. But let's face things day by day.
I work for a multinational corporation, so I had the chance to work from home. But I know many people, colleagues, friends, who do not have this opportunity, and they have to face up to this difficulty.
I work for the American University here in Rome, and this weekend they already decided to shut down all the classes. It happened in Florence as well, in many other places, so all our students had to leave. Some decided to stay, but only a few of them.
Italy's Consumer Association is warning of chaos, with productivity dropping as workers stay at home. The government is adamant they've made the right choices, as it deals with the unpredictability of a public health emergency. Ross Cullen, CGTN, Rome.
Well, let's go live now to Rome, where Ross Cullen joins us with the very latest on this outbreak in Italy. Ross, it has been a week or two of really a dramatic spike in both confirmed cases and deaths in Italy. Just to paint a picture for us on how the health system there is dealing with this incredible strain of the COVID-19 outbreak.
Well, the strain on the healthcare was one of the main reasons why the Prime Minister Giuseppe Conte and the Education Minister Lucia Azzolina, when they announced this measure a couple of days ago, brought in that unprecedented move to shut all schools and all universities across the country. Previously, schools had been closed in Italy on a case-by-case basis as and when people tested positive for the coronavirus, but now we're seeing all schools across the country closed for a 10-day period, and the Prime Minister saying that Italy does have an efficient healthcare system, it has excellent medical facilities, but it's undeniable there is a strain on those medical facilities with the spread of the coronavirus. Italy is the worst affected country in Europe, with 148 people now confirmed to have lost their lives, nearly 4,000 confirmed cases, and of course there are people who have got better. More than 400 people are confirmed to have been cured of the coronavirus here in Italy.
And Ross, as we can see now, authorities rushing to put into place effective containment measures. But what are authorities saying about what has been rather a seemingly quick spread of the virus, both within Italy and from Italy to other parts of the world?
Yes, it has responded to that. There was actually a map published on one other broadcaster this week that you could have interpreted it to have seen Italy portrayed as the birthplace of the virus, which of course, as we know, began in China. And the Foreign Minister, Luigi Di Maio, responding to that, saying misinformation, it can be dangerous and must not be used for the wrong ends, saying that discrimination can happen to any country and Italy will not accept it. Also, just touching on something that we heard a little earlier on in the programme, saying that we must be aware of fake news when it comes to the coronavirus and, of course, medical emergencies such as this one. We do unfortunately see incorrect facts and fake news spread online as well. So there's that fight as well, that battle going on to combat fake news. And the authorities, though, are adamant that they've been taking the right steps, that the measures they put in place, they've carried out at Lindy more than 30,000 tests on people using special swabs that you test the back of your throat and then you analyse the data after that. One reason that Italy's medical authorities are saying we are carrying out so many tests, that's why we have managed to register so many cases of people suffering from the virus.
And just looking at how citizens in the country are reacting to all of this, tell us about life under lockdown in Italy and how these towns that are under quarantine are actually being given supplies, just daily necessities during this lockdown period.
Yes, in Lombardy and Veneto, two regions in the north of the country. That's where we saw the first two lockdown areas, the two quarantine areas of several towns up there in the north of Italy that are suffering most from the outbreak. That's where we've seen the highest number of cases, particularly in the region of Lombardy. And those special measures now have been extended to at least the 8th of March. People in those towns urged to stay at home, to avoid social contact, although pharmacies and supermarkets, where they can, are still remaining open so people can have access to supplies. We heard in the report you played just there, we have spoken to people in Rome, how they're dealing with the disruption as well to their lives now that a lot of parents, working parents, can't go to their places of employment because they have to be at home now looking after their children, because the children can't go to school and students can't go to university. So people here trying to react to the disruption to their lives in what is, as you've mentioned, the country that's suffering from the largest outbreak of the coronavirus in Europe.
Indeed. Well, thank you so much for that update. Ross Cullen joining us there live from Rome. Now, let's give you a broader look at what is happening across the world as far as the coronavirus outbreak is concerned. China has reported 149 new cases of COVID-19 in the 24 hours leading up to midnight on Thursday. Outside Hubei province, there are 23 new cases from 5 regions. 20 of those are imported cases. 126 new cases were reported in Hubei province, all in the capital, Wuhan. China's total number of confirmed cases stands at around 80,000. Outside China, over 18,000 cases have been reported in more than 80 countries. South Korea has the most, nearly 6,600 infections. Iran, the worst hit country in the Middle East. It's reported around 3,500 cases and over 100 deaths. In Europe, Italy has seen over 3,900 cases and over 100 deaths. It is the largest outbreak on the continent. You are watching Africa Live. Time now for a short break.
Each day, there are millions of stories. Each one can open new perspectives, new possibilities. Wherever you look, we are there to see, discover, explore, We put the pieces together to find what really matters to you, all around the world, all around the clock. Our reporters are at home across the globe. From our headquarters in Beijing and production centers in Washington, Nairobi, and London, China Global Television Network. Stories from across the globe, reaching people across the globe. CGTN. See the difference.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
The U.S. government has said it is ready to pay $7 million to anyone with information that could lead to the arrest of Abu Bakr Shekau, the leader of Boko Haram. The Islamist group has carried out attacks in the past decade that have claimed the lives of thousands. Our correspondent Phil Ihaza tells us more about the terrorist leader and Nigeria's efforts to quell his deadly activities.
Abu Bakr Shekau, born in Yobe State, northeast Nigeria, became the leader of Boko Haram after the death of its founder in 2009. The group Boko Haram forbids Western education and are bent on carving out an Islamic state of their own. 45-year-old Shekau has led Boko Haram to carry out repeated deadly attacks and abductions in Nigeria.
You have an insurgency that is primarily caused by religious extremism and has festered around countries with poor state control. You have weak governance structure such that you have large swaths of land across this region that are ungoverned, as well as millions of lives that are also without government presence.
In 2014, Shekau directed the group to kidnap over 270 schoolgirls from a Chibok community in Borno State, and although many of the girls escaped and some were rescued by the military, 112 of them are yet to be found. By 2015, Shekau had pledged allegiance to the Islamic State of Iraq and the Levant. The U.S. Department of State, through its Rewards for Justice program, says it is offering millions of dollars for information that will lead to the arrest of Shekau. But security analysts say that alone may not help in tackling the war against insurgency in Nigeria.
There has to be a collaboration between the government and the Muslim community around the Sahel to roll back some of these extremist doctrines that are only found in mainstream Muslim theology. Until there's a rollback, what you find is that for every insurgent that is mowed down on the battlefield, there are tens, if not hundreds of replacements willingly.
The government says Boko Haram has been decimated since 2015 and a mop-up operation is being carried out on the fringes of the northeast and Lake Chad region.
The military is carrying out the final activity exercises in the Sambisa forest, which is the last foothold that the insurgents had.
But there's still been several cases of violence carried out since then by the militant group in Nigeria.
President Muhammadu Buhari reiterated his commitment to ending insurgency and restoring peace in the country after being re-elected last year for his second and final term. But the former military ruler may have a lot to prove in fishing out the terrorists and producing some kind of quick fix to end the campaign of terror. Phil Ihaza, CGTN, Abuja.
The Zimbabwean government has described the renewal of sanctions by the United States as regrettable and disappointing, but not surprising. President Donald Trump's administration has extended sanctions on the Southern African country's top officials and state-linked companies for another year. CGTN's Farai Makutoya has the details.
The United States accuses Zimbabwe's government of undermining democratic processes and says the sanctions will not be removed until there are political reforms. However, President Emmerson Mnangagwa's administration disagrees strongly with those allegations, as well as what it calls unfounded assertions that its security forces engaged in acts of extrajudicial killings and rape against its own citizens during violent protests last year. The Foreign Ministry says the United States chose to ignore efforts including the repealing of laws deemed to be repressive, implementation of recommendations of a commission into 2018 post-election deaths, plans to amend electoral laws, and to open up media space that shows Zimbabwe's willingness to reform. Notwithstanding this unfortunate setback, Zimbabwe says it will continue to re-engage with the United States, but based on mutual respect. Farai Makutuya, CGTN, Harare, Zimbabwe.
And coming up in your business news. Nigeria's Senate approves President Muhammadu Buhari's $22.7 billion request. And SADC ministers meeting in Dar es Salaam discuss ways to create jobs in the region.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
In your business news, Nigerian lawmakers have approved President Muhammadu Buhari's plan to borrow $22.7 billion aimed at financing key infrastructure projects. Senate gave its endorsement to seek the funding from the Islamic Development Bank, the African Development Bank and the World Bank. It is also set to secure funding from external creditors in China, Japan and Germany. The sale of a $3.3 billion Eurobond this year is expected to refinance an existing maturity and fund its budget of $35 billion. Africa's largest economy has been grappling with the effects of an economic contraction that has hindered economic development. South Africans are gearing up for another tough year as the economy continues to weaken. GDP data out this week confirmed South Africa slipped into a recession in the last quarter of 2019. This is the second recession in just 2 years. Power supply constraints have become the biggest hurdle to growth in the country. Sumitra Naidu reports.
The ongoing power cuts in South Africa are weighing heavily on economic activity, and it's adding to already existing problems in the country. Instead, the government continues to fund ailing state-owned entities and has thus far failed to hold anyone accountable for corruption that has dragged South Africa into an abyss.
We have to have some structural reform. It's certain that you cannot carry on as a government right now and pump in that much money into the enterprises that government owns. So we have to find ways where they stand on their own 2 feet, because we have over 10 million people unemployed.
It hasn't been an easy ride for President Cyril Ramaphosa. The ANC remains divided, unemployment is at record highs, and the country is on the brink of being downgraded to junk.
We also have the international problem of the coronavirus, which will impact on us. And our biggest trading partner is China. 15% of all our trade is with China, both exports and imports. And I think also the downgrade, is likely to happen. And one is concerned that this downgrade is going to come really at the wrong time for South Africa.
Some analysts are warning that this recession could drag on for some time unless the ANC makes some drastic decisions and changes policy and structural reforms.
There's more concern around the lack of policy implementation.
So I would not encourage them to rewrite anything. So whatever's already been crafted, whatever's already been committed to by the various social partners and even the alliance partners, execute on it, and only once you've done that, tell us that this is the reason it hasn't worked. But to simply spend every single year, every single term, every single administration writing things that are never going to be executed is not going to get us anywhere.
It's not clear if there will be a plan to improve the situation.
I think at this stage we're hoping that they will be able to put some efforts into doing something, but in the absence of a clear intervention that is not based on broad abstract principles, but rather key issues, key indicators that you're going to tackle within particular particular timelines. That's what we need to see, and I'm not sure if we're going to see it.
In the meantime, South Africans will have to tighten their belts, clear debt, hold on to their jobs, and save for more rainy days. Sumitra Naidu, CGTN, Johannesburg, South Africa.
The Southern African Development Community has set measures that will improve the labour market in the region. This comes after a 3-day meeting between labour and employment ministers from the bloc in Dar es Salaam. Unemployment in the region has slowed down economic development, with the rate currently standing between 9 and 11%. That's compared to the global average of 5.1%.
Katika kujenga urafiki na undugu.
In building friendship and regional cooperation, along with this launch, delegates will have a chance to visit and see the success of the National Internship Program for Tanzania's youth. This program has helped many young people prepare to enter the job market.
Ni dhahiri kwamba tunahitaji kukua kwa teknolojia na matumizi yake.
It's obvious that we need to grow and use technology, but technology is taking a large percentage of work initially done by people. Technology is only good when it creates new employment, not when it reduces human labor.
Matumizi ya nguvu kazi au
The International Air Transport Association has revealed that the coronavirus outbreak could cost airlines up to $113 billion in lost revenues. Association officials also addressed the risks of possibly being infected on flights during a press conference in Singapore. CGTN's Mirulu has more.
The COVID-19 crisis has had a severe impact on air traffic. As the virus takes hold in more countries outside China, airlines around the world are now experiencing significant declines in demand, leading to flight cuts, unpaid leave of staff, and as of this week, the first collapse of a carrier.
Take stock of where the industry is.
The International Air Transport Association, or IATA, updated its analysis of the financial impact of the novel coronavirus on the global air transport industry, and warned that COVID-19 could cost airlines up to $113 billion in lost global revenue.
The global airline industry is in a very fragile situation at the moment. Many airlines have got very thin profit margins, and so the scale of the revenue shock that we're facing because of the COVID-19 outbreak it could be a disaster for many airlines, which is why we're seeking support from partners and from governments.
The number of flights to, from, and within China cancelled or removed from schedules totaled almost 350,000 from the end of January to the end of February. That's according to data from Cirium, an aviation and air traffic analytics company. Beijing has moved to help the stalling airline industry by rolling out cash support to domestic and foreign airlines on routes with Chinese destinations and departure points. The hope is to reshore services and stop the suspension of flights during the virus outbreak.
I think it's very encouraging that we see the Chinese government offering support to maintain connectivity because the Chinese airlines have been in the center of the crisis. They have seen a collapse in air travel, and it's been extraordinarily difficult. Many of the costs airlines have are fixed and can't be avoided, so they do need support.
Many carriers are reporting 50% no-shows across several markets, according to the IATA, with forward bookings softening as travelers curb plans for fear of contamination or simply the unknown.
Flying is a very safe form of transport, and the risk of getting any serious infection on board remains low at the moment. The reality is that the air change in an airline cabin on a jetliner is 10 times greater refresh rate than what you'd have in this building, for example. So the supplied air is very pure, and the only risk remains from close contact with other people.
IATA experts stress that it is hard to make predictions on when the airline industry will rebound after the COVID-19 outbreak. They also noted that many other industries could be adversely affected as a result of the economic shock to the airline industry. For now, the association is asking for government and industry support and cooperation during these trying times. Mirulu, CGTN, Singapore.
Egypt has reopened its oldest pyramid after a 14-year restoration period that cost more than $6 million. The pyramid of King Djoser was built about 4,700 years ago and was the first pyramid erected in ancient Egypt. CGTN's Adel Al-Makhroui reports.
Egypt has been recently seeing numerous inaugurations for archaeological sites. This celebration, however, is special. For the last 14 years, Egypt spent millions of dollars to restore Djoser Pyramid, the first stone pyramid built in ancient Egypt and the world.
We consider the restoration and rehabilitation of our heritage is one of those mega projects that maybe it comes on the top of the list of our priorities. So we are very proud this is Egyptian legacy, but we know very well it's a world and global heritage that we are very keen to maintain it for everybody in this globe.
Built in 2730 BC, this 4,750 years old structure has been only restored twice. The first was in 600 BC, and it hasn't been touched till now.
In 1992, the earthquake in Egypt here, it's happened, and get this, the roof and the ceiling get down and cover all the sarcophages down. So in our project, we start to work inside the pyramid first. First, to remove all this stone outside and remove all the dusty outside, and beginning to make restoration to the ceiling by anchors. It's called anchors. More than 150 anchors in the ceiling to support the ceiling.
The pyramid is composed of 6 main steps. It's 60 meters high. Passages underground stretch to about 3 kilometers in length. The complexity of the structure makes experts wonder how ancient Egyptians have built it without modern technology.
What you see is not all the pyramid. This is just the above the ground part. The underground section of the pyramid is some sort of an architectural miracle. If we give a little thought, we get confused. How could the ancient Egyptians build that architecture all those years ago?
The pyramid was constructed for King Djoser, the ruler of ancient Egypt in the 3rd dynasty. He and his family are all buried inside. After years of planning and implementation, Djoser Pyramid is finally fully restored, and visitors coming to this magnificent site can take a tour around the pyramid and walk inside the oldest grand stone structure known to mankind. Adel Al-Makhroui, CGTN, Cairo.
Your sports news coming up next. Up ahead, ES Tunis looking for revenge as they host Zamalek in Friday's qualification battle. We start with African football. Rising from the CAF Confederations Cup, Zamalek has enjoyed a great run of form and eventually beating Esperance to win the CAF Super Cup. The past 3 weeks has seen the Egyptian White Knights win twice over Esperance Sportive de Tunis and domestic rivals Al Ahly. On Friday, the club will be chasing a 3rd consecutive victory over Esperance in Tunisia to snatch its ticket to the Champions League semi-finals. Here's CGTN's Adel Al-Makhroui with more.
Zamalek and Esperance are about to climb